David, you're very welcome to our science review. We pick a paper every week. Normally it's on a Thursday, but we've moved things around a little bit. And David, why did you pick this particular paper? Maybe give us a bit of an outline of why you picked it and maybe some of your observations.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, first of all, thanks a million for being so accommodating, and apologies for the scheduling issues, but we got here.
We got here.
I think looking at this particular paper by Kristen Jonvik, I think it's just more timely of where we're at. Not necessarily just from what's the latest research, but actually the evolution of the discipline, and the actual field itself, looking at what is going on a little bit more globally and sort of exploring the impacts that that's going to have on sports nutrition over the coming years. And I think the thing that really stood out to me from this research was actually the historical piece, because when you read it, you start to feel like history is repeating itself. And I think one of the bigger things there was, if we actually look at every breakthrough we've had in sports nutrition, it's always been punctuated by some breakthrough in technology. The 1900s, it was gas analysis. Then we start to understand, let's say, substrate utilization a little bit better. With the Bergstrom needles, sort of 60s, 70s, now we can understand a little bit more about glycogen. And more tech has started to come in. We've had GPS, power meters. And I feel like where we're at now is, we're just at the next technology. And I'm sure beyond this, it will carry on repeating. But it was, it was one that really struck home with me and probably made me reflect a little bit to say, actually, this is what's happening now is not necessarily new. It's just the newest thing.
Well, I suppose it's about us understanding a little bit more about, or giving us a little bit better the tools to understand what is actually happening in the body. What demands are being placed on us from a physical point of view, and where can we understand a little bit more about how we can adapt our behaviors and adapt what we do to perform that little bit better. Was there anything in particular, because it's a little bit, it's wide ranging, in terms of its references. Is there anything in particular from your point of view that excites you?
Yeah, I would say personalized prescriptions excite me. And it's something that we've seen ACSM position stands been calling for the last year. We need to move from, group level recommendations to individual level recommendations. But now with technology, we actually have the ability to build and develop those systems that, enable truly personalized support in real time, that can be dynamic and that can adapt depending on if things go to plan or if things go off plan. So I think that really excites me. I do feel we're, and it's something that we would always endeavor to do as practitioners, and as something that's probably of the highest value to most individuals, is getting truly personalized support unique to their demands.
What does
Tailored.
that, what does it mean, David? In very, very simple terms, what does it mean to understand those demands?
I feel like there's two layers. I would say one of those demands is, let's say it's more from a mathematical perspective. How much energy do you need in relation to the type, the intensity, the duration of your activity, your physical profile, your typical sleep wake patterns, your lifestyle activity. So there's the number side, which I think is, if we look at, I suppose, that pyramid, are we getting sufficient energy and avoiding deficiency? Are we getting the right macronutrients? And then are we looking at the right type, timing, and total amounts? I think the second half to that is actually starting to figure out what works for who, how well, in what setting, and why. The second half of that is probably the bit that really excites me, because I think the numbers bit can, is easier to solve, but then actually delivering tailored support to somebody is, I think that's going to be a bigger breakthrough.
I'm going to let the girls come in a second, but something within what you just described in that second there is something we believe in what we do. We ask people who work with us to really dial in their own detail and understanding themselves and different demands under different circumstances. And there's always this kind of thing in my head where technology is absolutely fantastic, but you can't just rely on that. You actually have to spend the time in that practice, in that reflection yourself, seeing, well, does this actually work? Or am I just going to am I just going to use a piece of technology to tell me that it works or that this is the right amount? Who, I suppose my question to you is, who do you think this is really relevant for, and how do you get the balance right between those?
I think it can be applicable to everyone because I think everyone has different goals, different motivations. Everyone wants to achieve something, whether that's an improvement in health or a maintenance of health, or performance can be different for different people in different settings. Not everyone's a high performance athlete, but some people might want to get a park run PB. But I think understanding what works for you is definitely applicable to everyone. And I think you used a really interesting word there as well, which is tell, you know, and when it comes to working and supporting individuals, like we know that knowledge and behavior are equivocal. There's only going to be a small translation of knowledge into actual behaviors. But actually, so if we start telling people this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, as opposed to give them the tools to be able to make them, I suppose, more autonomous in their decision making. And we've done some research internally as well, where we started to dive into looking at athletes and individuals' needs for autonomy. And it's crazy the uniformity in this space of, and it makes sense. It comes back to the self-determination theory. People want autonomy. No one likes to be told what to do. Everyone likes to be, you could say, oh, you could choose to do this, but telling somebody you should and have to go and do this, there's, same messages deliver completely differently with completely different outcomes.
So a big part of the way that we're working with clients and I've seen huge success is just getting them to reflect on and try to really understand, even though they've been given the mathematical side, the numbers, and they've got resources and access to different recipes, and it's trying to get them to understand where the changes might be needed based on maybe this isn't sitting well with me before I train, and just understand how to adapt that side of things. Like from your side, is there any particular like characteristics or of an individual that would be more suited to using the likes of apps, and maybe other people would sit having a more reflective approach and just taking things from a more of the practical side rather than just, I suppose, following the guidelines and that. I don't know.
And just before you come in there, David, I suppose we are looking all the time to try and figure out how to provide better measurement. How do you give better measurement for people? You talked about the tools. How do you show the evidence to somebody that this stuff is, because it's very challenging. Our discipline is incredibly challenging. As we've talked about for 10 years, hydration testing and body composition were usually our primary markers. So, I suppose first talking about those characteristics, I mean, what Gemma asked is still relevant, but it's to trying to give people that sense of evidence. This stuff is really important and very effective.
Yeah. I feel we've taken a complete swing away from this paper, but I feel like this is an interesting conversation that I'd love to delve into even further again.
This happens every single time we have a conversation.
This is we'll be here for a few hours. I think it's a really good question, Jem, and I think it comes back to, if we start to look at some of the implementation science, we know that action planning and goal setting can be very important. Having a plan, something that somebody can refer back to when that motivation is increased, is important, because actually, like I said, when we have that spike, they still need to know what to do at that moment in time. So there should be an underlying backbone that can be a referral piece, and it can provide a bit of structure. But then it starts to come down to that sort of implementation intention and starting to look at, like you said, if they reflect. So if you're starting to get somebody to think about something, there's a deliberate process where you might be looking at their beliefs about the consequences of what they think should or shouldn't happen, or maybe it's a beliefs about their capabilities. And actually, really what we're looking at there is a reflective motivation intervention. And actually, I think both of them need to go side by side. because there's certain language that we can use as practitioners to evoke thoughts and emotions, whether it's hope or fear, pleasure or pain, social acceptance, social rejection, to get them to start to think about their role, their identity, their own beliefs. And then when this, I suppose, how this fits into their system. And it's so, if I look at individuals, and is there certain types of individuals that I would say would benefit more from tech than others? I would start with practitioners first. And I think we're kind of entering into, and really like the core of this paper from Christian Jonvik is, for me, highlighting we're going into this era of hybrid coaching where we will never leave as practitioners, but we will have access to these tools that will also do what computers are good at. Deliver real-time support, make sure all of the backbone or those sort of action plans are in place. And then the coach can still deliver the sort of the tacit knowledge that they need to build relationships, build trust, and have conversations. So I think, looking for signals in an individual, I actually look for signals in conversations to just try listen and hear, okay, what are they struggling with? Is it a belief system? Is it something about their identity? Is it something about their goals? And that's what I would look to pick up on more than anything else. But I would still have a plan there as the backbone structure in the meantime, because motivation's like this. But we can't rely on ourselves being there for every spike to say, okay, they've had a spike in motivation. We now need to be at the other end of the phone to make the most of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that question, that was really helpful. But I think that question, even in terms of measurement that Daniel mentioned, is a big thing that we're working on as well. And I suppose it'll be really interesting to see how that bounces off.
I love this question. And I actually haven't discussed this with anyone except maybe Sam Impey at this stage. I think we're making a massive mistake in nutrition when it comes to measurement, because we're measuring, the only way we're determining if something was successful or not is based on an outcome. So did weight or body composition move in X or Y direction? Did someone track their intake and tell you I had this? And we know there's going to be inherent flaws in all of these things. But if we look at the world globally now, like, we're competing for attention. We need to be capturing, are we getting somebody to think about something at the right time? So let's say, for example, Gemma, high performance footballer, you've got training tonight at 6. Are you thinking about what you should be eating at lunchtime? Whether you do or don't do it or not, we can still say that actually it's positive if we've got you to think about it at 1 o'clock and what you're going to have at lunch. Now, if you thought about it and didn't do it, motivation wasn't high enough. There has to be something that we need to learn to go, okay, we got you thinking at the right time, but we couldn't spike your motivation high enough. So I think if we look at outcomes, I think we need to look at the steps before that. And I think we need to look at, how do we capture people's markers of when people are thinking, and then markers of when people are planning, because then we know actually, okay, now we've got a nice, steady play here. Has somebody planned, or do they have the plan? Are they thinking about it? At some point, the outcome will come. But if those two aren't there, and all we're looking at is the last bit, I think we're missing the majority of the puzzle.
Gemma, do you ever think you've been teed up to knock it out of the park better than just this moment? Do you want to show some of the graphs from Empower? We have done 18 months of thinking about what you've just described, David. Now, you have very eloquently described it, but the thinking aspect, like, we've tried to create almost like a matrix of questions to outline the power of this. So showing people through their check-ins, if they're thinking about what you're talking about, and there's actions associated with that thought, how the outcome will look after itself if you continue to invest in that process of learning. So we've got some really nice stuff that's beginning to emerge from our own work around that.
Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. I you're ahead of the curve on this one. And I think it's something where people are going to need to catch up on. And it's something that we're seeing in other products and services. There's lessons to learn from things like the hook cycle. Where are the triggers? Are they internal? Are they external? Are they emotional? Are they owned? Like you said, what are the actions?
Sorry, David. I didn't mean to come in there. It's still exceptionally difficult to get accurate data because you're trying to get people to buy into something that they've never measured before. So it's incredibly novel, it's incredibly exciting, but no matter how many times we talk about the value of it and the power of it, people are still going to be drawn to transformation photos.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Eva, Gemma, again, do you want to come in there at all?
No, I think Dave, the way you explained that was was very good in the sense that that's what we're always trying to get the client to do. So even if we say like if they couldn't step on the scales, if that wasn't a thing, like how would you measure that you are going in the right direction? And that is the thoughts, the different processes, that thought of the planning and actually doing it and how that made them feel. So it's going down to the emotional side of what they've never done before and getting that process in place.
Yeah, brilliant. There's lessons from their own life, from technology. If you told somebody, do you use Instagram a lot? And they said, no, I never post. But then you looked at the amount of times that they open and close the app or quickly checked or scrolled. They could be thinking about it for hours and never post. So again, it's quite similar in that sense. It's like, if we look at nutrition and you're only looking at the outcome, you're only looking at the post, there's all this other stuff that is going to be layered behind it. So yeah, I think that is the right approach. And I think we'll get better at quantifying this over time. I do think we'll be able to harvest this data pretty effectively over the next few years. And I think that's when we'll get into that, going back to earlier, that second half of what works for who, how well, why, and in what setting.
I was on a meeting very recently where we were really pushed on time as well, and it forces the conversation to be very concise, and this has been really good, even though it's been brief. David, do you want to give us a minute or whatever time you have on the work that you're doing in Hexus, maybe a status update, what you've learned, what's exciting you about your work at the moment with Hexus?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose the things that really excite me, I suppose, are the team that we're working with more than anything else. We've got a great team internally, and we're really just pushing to build technology that can help people fuel smarter, perform better, and recover faster at the minute. We've got a few exciting product launches coming up to add value around helping people understand what to consume during their workout and not just before and after, as well as the reintroduction of some recipe features over the coming months. But more than anything, I think we're over to the NBA in about 10 days time. So looking forward to getting across there and spending a little bit of time, and I'm sure we'll pick up more lessons.
Awesome. And lastly, David, it's an app, and you've done a huge amount of work on it. Do you just as a matter of interest, even for Gemma and Eva to hear, when did the conversations around it start as an app, as a concept?
There's actually a very funny conversation here. We had been doing, I had met people during my PhD research, and they'd come from a data science, computer science background as well. And we'd been looking at it. I suppose we'd been looking at research first. I think there was, and Daniel probably, we had discussed years ago the potential of technology. I got very interested in the concept of building something, but didn't really know what it was, what it could build. But probably around 2018 is when, I think, on the back of some research and maybe a ground up movement, where we started to see dietary periodization being not just uptaken in cycling, but in all other disciplines. So I actually phoned Sam Impey at the time and said, look, we actually want to turn this into a platform. He shared a deck that he had a similar concept around. But I think we sort of went from there with the team that we had.
Wow. That conversation we had, David, 2015, so nearly 10 years ago. So there you go.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just how long it can take to get things off the ground, but just you gotta persevere, and you're in a really good place. And it's really good to be able to have these conversations. And David, you've always been a great friend, and I look forward to lots more of these chats, and wishing you well in the short and medium term. Thanks, David.
Apologies for the time delay.
No, you go ahead, and myself and the girls are going to hang on for a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Dave.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
David.
Yeah.
The observations for me straight away, the first thing that comes to mind is how good it is to speak to somebody who is working on, that's working in the discipline of nutrition, but in a different space, and just hearing their perspectives, what they're working on, what they feel is exciting or valuable to them, but also how
It's aligned.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think for us, like, are we mad? Are we mad doing all of this? But when you hear someone else, even the way he explained it differently to what we're doing, but it's the same concept.
Exactly what
That's
I
cool.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except I joke all the time with David that he wants a global concept. He wants a concept that, he wants to establish something for exactly the same reasons, but on a global standing. He wants to be able to provide that app on an international level, and it's just it's a bigger vision of the same type of thing. But I just think it's so interesting how even a couple of words that David would have shared there would still help us in our communication around our delivery.
Definitely. And just even on that measurement thing, just to hear that without us bringing anything up, that was the process is really something that has to be highlighted. And the more that we can let people know that this is honestly where the big moves are, and for you to see that all these little things that you're doing are going to accumulate and lead to the outcome that you're looking for.
Something that I hadn't really thought of in much depth, but I know that I do think about the way he just talked about it was even people's beliefs in themselves, like that process. I can't remember all the words like the belief in themselves. What was the other ones that he said? Or even
he talked about pain. He talked about identity. It's ultimately it's an emotional response. It's their emotional state. That it's decisions that are based on your emotional state, based on what he mentioned in terms of, it can be pain, it can be sadness, it can be joy.
Until she went to him, she had no belief in herself that she would get better with her knee, and that has kind of sparked something. She's like, I had no belief in myself. I thought this was me. I'm just at this age and nothing's going to get better. But actually finding that little spark to be able to push herself on, saying, no, I am capable of doing that. So her decisions up to this point has been made on self-belief.
I'm so happy you shared that, Eva, because what you just said, did she use the word spark? I think that's a great word. And I think that, I'm not going to say I'm going to rob that now, but
copyright.
But I think that's the type of language we talk about, how we relate to the people that we work with. I think using a word like that, that's so positive, that can ignite something. Pardon all the puns now, but I think that's the kind of thing where you start to recognize there's a pattern here. And if I can use those type of words, that it can create that sense of, actually, that's all I need. That's all I need is that little spark of confidence, or that little spark of energy to get me going again. And I think that's the beauty of having these type of conversations.
I think it's even recognizing when that ignites, like on a, because of even all those things that you mentioned where we're talking about self-belief and confidence and like doubting yourself, all those things, how they change throughout any given day, any given week. But if you can recognize that this is something that I do that tends to make me feel like I make better decisions following that. It's like noticing where those patterns lie and what behaviors led to that.
But one of the things that really struck me when listening to David, and the way that he was describing the process around an athlete's individualized feedback system. And ours was, I used to, when you talked about the spark there, even, that's why that's the reason it resonated with me so much, is in my resources for my clients, I would have on the second or third page around reflection, I just put in a big picture of a light bulb. And I talk in the sessions. I've talked actually about it in a long time in the sessions. Just it's an interesting reflection of my own conversations, but how powerful the light bulb moments are when you begin to think and you start to put the behaviors and actions and emotional response that David talked about with the decisions that you're making. And if you can begin to create those patterns or those light bulb moments, those moments need to be captured, because they're the significant moments of realization and change. They're your big kind of aha, geez, I didn't realize the impact that work stress, fatigue, lack of sleep, the injury, overtrain, all of these things, I didn't realize the impact they were having on me and how they're making me feel. And it's just brought again to the fore the value of trying to create evidence for people of those. And if we can make that the format, and that's why we've done so much work. we've talked so much about our process over the recent times. If we can make that template as simple as possible for people to recognize those moments, then that's really facilitating change. I went in to get my knee assessed yesterday with a complete focus on, I need a solution. I'm done here. And when I went in, the physio, it was such a lesson to me in coaching, because all I could feel when I went in to get my knee assessed yesterday, I could sense my defensiveness. I could sense I've worked really hard here. And I was waiting for him to go, yeah, I've done the work. I could feel the frustration built up in me about the pain and the instability, and I was there for a solution. And this is the thing, the joke I'm relaying back to people coming to us looking for a meal plan. But he was able to clearly show me where the deficits were and why the deficits were there. You haven't been creating enough of a stimulus or attention on this part of your muscle in your leg, which stabilizes this part of your knee. And there's almost a 40% deficit in the specific areas that you need. So the work that you've been doing, first of all, you've been doing twice the volume of work in the wrong way. So the exercise you've been doing, you've been stimulating a different part of your quad, which doesn't stabilize the knee. And I came out of it with such a sense of, right, well, the first thing was that I didn't feel judged. I felt like he was redirecting my energy for me to be more effective. It wasn't, well, why have you been doing the wrong exercises and doing 2 times the amount that you should? You're an absolute idiot. And I think it's really important, just as for us, to constantly remind ourselves of what it must feel like for a person to come to have a conversation with us about their nutrition and how frustrated they may feel about their lack of progress in the previous months or years.
And even for someone with all your knowledge and experience, still to feel like that, going and looking for a solution, to have the experience and to be kind of brought back to like the what's important and what to focus on, and know exactly what your next step is, to bring that clarity then helps to, I suppose, get you back onto the path, or to know exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't going to use this word, but I am now. Like, ultimately, I felt vulnerable in there. And like, all I wanted to do was tell that guy who I've never met before in my life how much work I've been doing. All I wanted him to know was how strong I was in a split squat, even though it was fucking irrelevant. He asked me to do 30 calf raises to fatigue. I was in bits after 15. And I just struggled through it. I was like, I'm actually in quite a bit of pain here. He said, well, stop. But just, I think the reason I'm sharing this is how humbling it can be to be in those situations and being at the mercy of another professional. I suppose it's not a punchline, but the big point, the big part of this that I wanted to communicate is that he took out a device which could measure pressure just like that from multiple different angles. And he could tell me about, so we looked at key movements that were relevant to my knee, and he could tell me 38%, 24%, 6%. What did that do for me? Total clarity on the exercises that I need to do. You think about us as practitioners, and how challenging it can be to create that measurement for people that David talked about, or that we talk about in the thinking process, in the planning process, in the structuring process, in the timing process, and how good we need to be around what those measures are and how we can help people to show what we've been talking about in terms of behavior change, what we're trying to do with measuring. It's just for people back home that are watching. We haven't this planned, but just to give a little bit of an insight to what we're trying to do to give that measurement component.
So this is our current Empower members, where we're looking at they've had a baseline assessment to assess their nutrition knowledge, and this, I suppose, helped shape the direction in which they're going for the initial phase of the program. And then each week we're collecting data on the things that we've looked at here. So we've got cooking skills, balancing food groups, their sleep, we're measuring their meal planning, their energy levels, fruit and veg intake, food quality, and then their relationship with food, and seeing how that evolves over the course of the program. And we also collect I don't think any names come up in this, but like personal reflections based on these behaviors and the things that they feel like went well that week and things that they feel needs an improvement. So it's just capturing that reflective data as well as the data that we can see here, just rating themselves and their improvements across, or where they feel they're at for that week.
And Gemma, over the last 18 months, of all of the data and all the people who've come through that have been completing this practice, what has been the learnings? Like, what has been the highlights of this process?
So the biggest one was probably just being able to show that while we've got week 1 to 2 looks good, it's improved, but across a longer period, we see the fluctuation that you have across different weeks. But that over time, it's when you're focusing on the process and you're looking at your behaviors and what you're doing and seeing what's important for that particular week, that it goes in a positive direction. But those fluctuations are sometimes inevitable just based on where you're at for the week and what challenges that you have. But so long as you can kind of get back on track and place the focus in the right area the following week, that's where the biggest wins really are.
And Eva, in a one-to-one, what type of feedback have you seen through the Empower and through some of your conversations?
Like what Gemma said, it's never linear. There's going to be weeks that some is better than others, or there might be 1 or 2 weeks that it starts to go down a little bit. But it's the thing that we've noticed the most is that people are able to reflect backwards on, okay, what were they doing on the weeks prior that those practices were improving, and they're able to, for them to put something in place to work towards kind of getting them improved. So by the end of, was it the 12 weeks, we always see we say that line improving, but it's not just it's not a vertical line. I think that the most important thing for us is people are able to get themselves back to where they would like to be in those good practices, versus when they started, they didn't know what was their good, what was their not so good, and they're able to just push on.
And what about people who've completed the Empower, 6 months ago? Because that has been incredibly insightful and rewarding to see, because we've had some feedback from people who completed the program a while back.
Yeah, so what people are saying is it's not just 12 weeks. This is for long term. This is for their life. This is for their behaviors and their habits, and that they are continuing to see changes within all of the things that they're monitoring. And it's all of these elements that make the biggest impact on how you're feeling, how you're moving, how you're recovering, or even if it is for weight loss or fat loss. That it's, if these components aren't right, then the outcome is so much harder to achieve, or even to measure as well.
I connected with a Race Empower member, and she had mentioned that it was how the biggest thing for her was how her expectations have now changed, and that she was constantly looking for something that was just going to lead her to the exact outcome that she had in mind, but it was actually her outcomes and expectations changed and evolved, and now she's better able to manage more challenging times, whereas before a challenging time to her was like a failure, whereas now it was something that she can navigate, move through, and continue to progress after it.
And that's exactly what David talked about, and that's what we are all about. In terms of, David talked about having autonomy, and talked about having the tools and enabling, not telling people what to do, but actually facilitating them to know what they need to change. And it's we talk a lot about the early phase of this being uncomfortable and it feeling sticky, that these initial steps are, they're not easy. They're not easy steps, but they're the steps that really allow you to achieve what you just talked about, Eva and Gemma, along into the future.
Mm-hmm.
My last thing on it this morning is just what it does again for my head to talk to somebody else who's not just, I don't know, it just brings a sense of excitement and energy and enthusiasm to your day and to your outlook about what you do again, and how valuable that can be just to have that spark.
There we go.